Earlier this year, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to travel to Barcelona for 2 weeks and work with the students from Fotoskolan Stockholm. The trip coincided with the release of the Fuji X100VI, and through some luck and connections, I was able to borrow one and experiment a bit with it during the trip. I've owned several earlier versions of the X100 series and was mostly interested in finding out how the new model would fare as a video camera, especially as a travel camera. I was in Barcelona to work as a teacher and only had limited time for any sort of photography, so everything here is very much run and gun with minimal or rather no setup. All the footage you see during the video was filmed using the X100VI and is more or less straight out of camera. I've only made the most basic adjustments to exposure and white balance. Everything was filmed in Fuji Log 2, H.265, Ultra HD in 422 10-bit color with manual exposure, and then converted to Rec 709 using the Fuji Eternal LUT. I've always been a fan of the looks of the X100. The classic camera look with proper dials is something Fuji really has nailed. But with that said, that's always been the reason I've decided not to keep the earlier X100s that I've owned. The more modern setup with front and back dials, like most DSLRs and mirrorless cameras have, is just quicker to work with, especially with the camera up at your eye. This was even more apparent when using the X100VI as a video camera. I ended up setting up the camera to use the front and back dials instead of the classic dials. At least that is possible to do, thanks Fuji, but it does sort of call the use of classic dials into question. I'm not going to go through the technical specs of the camera. There are plenty of other reviews that do that much better than I could ever do. What I will share here are my impressions of using the camera as a travel video camera. My setup was very minimal, as that would seem to be the whole point of using a small compact camera, and the only accessory I used was a filter adapter and a variable ND. Something I appreciated a lot while using the camera was the built-in ND filter. By itself it's not all that useful as it's not adjustable, but it proved to be great to use in conjunction with an additional screw-on variable ND filter. With that set up, I could quickly change my ND settings and have a good range with only one extra filter. I could use the camera without an ND in bad light, with my 2 to 5 stop adjustable ND when needed, and then quickly add the built-in filter to change the range in very bright situations. With the camera set up the way I like it, it was reasonably quick to operate, and I could change settings and capture behind-the-scene moments without too much delay. But I do have to stress that it was with the camera set up as a modern mirrorless camera, not using the classic dials. It would be great if the camera had a waveform monitor display to set the exposure, but it was possible to get by using the exposure meter and the histogram display that the X100 has, even though I found that the histogram was rather slow to register changes. I tend to use manual focus a lot while filming and quickly found that that was not easy on the X100. The compact nature of the camera makes the focus ring difficult to operate, and the fly-by-wire focusing does not feel all that intuitive. But that's an understandable consequence of designing a compact camera, so I tried to use the autofocus instead. The autofocus worked reasonably well, but seemed to hunt more than I expected, and even when it worked well, there seemed to be visible steps during focusing. I might have been able to optimize the focus settings with more time and find a setup that worked better, but with the limited time I had, I just used the standard settings, and this is the result that I got. The camera worked as a travel video camera, much more so than earlier versions, but it's still obvious that it's primarily a stills camera. Depending on your needs and ambitions, I can both recommend it and not recommend it. For casual travel video, it works great, but for any serious work, it is a bit limited. For the filming I did in Barcelona, I would gladly have traded the convenience of small size for better handling while filming. My Panasonic S5 IIX with a prime lens would have been bigger, but the results would also have been better. But have a look at the results and make up your own mind. Do you think it's good enough for your needs?